Okay, so video time. I did actually do another little vid, given that it was the Brazilian Carnival recently, and obviously Rio being quite iconic, had to go and was very disappointed. But then I had my usual rant in one of these videos, and then I kind of watched it back and realised it's a little bit too negative, so it's good to balance things out. And in addition to that, for some reason, my phone seems to mirror files as it saves, so in essence, and it's always filming in HD, so I'm utilizing so much memory it cuts out, and I couldn't be bothered to crop the video or film another video and then conjoin it with the original, so I just thought I'd shoot another one. So now down in Blumenau, which is in Santa Catarina, which is the famed area, as it's kind of synonymous with, I guess, German heritage and German migration. A lot of expatriates here from either Germany or Austria or even the Netherlands. So because of that, it was a kind of quite an interesting place to stop by. And yeah, but it's going to be on the Rio Carnival. So I just want to say, this isn't... where should we begin? So a lot of people, when they see a country, there's like a kind of national identity. And I think South America as a whole, even though I don't really consider Brazil to be Latino as such, given that Portuguese language creates that barrier between themselves and the rest of Latin America, or the rest of South America, the Latin side of South. But a lot of people seem to still feel that they're kind of a part of that, and that South America as a whole is very kind of, you could say, prideful when it comes to their national heritage. But actually in Brazil, given how vast it is, you'd expect it to be different. You have more kind of Amazonian influence in the north, as you'd expect, with people looking aesthetically more like a native kind of South American, whereas in the south, in Catarina, people are very European. Likewise, the further south you go into Rio Grande and Uruguay and into Argentina, you've got a lot of European influence and heritage. But anyway, so I was in Rio for this carnival, and I actually detoured, I extended the trip by 2 months to incorporate Rio, as I didn't really just want to go all the way from where I was at the time, which was actually Panama, through to Rio without kind of taking advantage of some places along the way. Consequently, I took the, getting bitten by a mosquito, they never end, the ferry from Tabatinga, which is in southern Colombia. You can also link into, what is that? Good God. It's been bitten there. Mad. That was stingy. So yeah, that's the kind of crossroads where you can go into Brazil and Peru. You can go into Iquitos. So a lot of people obviously take that route all the way down the Amazon via the Colombian and Brazilian border, ending either in Manaus or Santarém, or even Belém or Macapá if they want to go all the way to the ocean. And it always takes twice as long to go the other way because you're going against the current. So actually this was a very cost-effective method, and it was very aesthetically pleasing as well, very calming boat. I think it was 48 USD for 4 days on the boat with unlimited food, and the food was a good standard too. But so I got to Rio, fast tracking here, and parties aren't really my scene anymore. And if I go out, it's more of a kind of specific kind of party that I'm gearing towards, usually something music orientated or cultural. And you could argue the carnival's cultural, but the problem is it's not really. That's the thing. It's really geared towards tourism, and that's fine. And it would be fine if the people were actually, sound as a pound. But frankly, and I've heard the same from Brazilians from outside of the state of Rio about their compatriots, that these people are very immoral and very arrogant and very criminal orientated, and it is essentially a kind of super state operated by cartel. And I've been to Rio before, briefly. I still haven't seen the Jesus statue, and actually I left this time because I hated the place so much. But last time I was there, I walked out my hotel, my a Japanese guest in the hotel walked out, and he was shot in the leg with a 9mm because he was carrying an expensive camera. And instead of just threatening him, which would have been sufficient, of course, to take his camera, they shot him first and then took the camera. And of course, getting shot in the leg, you hit an artery, you're gone, especially in Brazil. where things certainly aren't going to show up on time with a German standard. Let's say if you have to call an ambulance in Rio, it probably never is going to show up, so you bleed out by that point. And that's not why I left before. I was just transiting through, and you get a vibe from it. It's quite a sketchy place, and there's a lot of trash, a lot of drug addicts on the street, a lot of homelessness, a lot of general criminality, and in my mind, it's now been upgraded to the next level. I see this place as the most racist place on earth that I've been. People think of Brazil as very multicultural, which it is, as I just stated. But in Rio and the further north you go, people aesthetically obviously look a lot darker, and it's a lot more, let's say, there's a lot more African influence from Rio up to Salvador and onwards to, say, Recife and Fortaleza. And then if you keep going, it becomes more kind of native South American, kind of Amazonian tribes people aesthetically, so browner. And then in the south, of course, people are paler. But contrasting Sao Paulo and Rio, it's very interesting, because Sao Paulo is certainly not my cup of tea, and no city really is. But obviously Rio is quite iconic. It's quite, it's really, it's a global place. It's known by a lot of people in the world that may never even have been to the continent. It's one of those cities like London and Paris. And it's aesthetically quite a pretty place, especially if you're looking at it from perhaps the water or from an aerial position, like where the Christ statue is, which I didn't get to see again. But the carnival itself, for Rio especially, and having been to Sao Paulo and Rio, I can compare, is more of a kind of young person's drinking venture. It's just an excuse to get completely shit-faced, and it's not a good vibe if you're white. If you're white, and it's not just if you're a white tourist, though of course the blonder and the more touristy you look, the more you're asking for trouble, essentially. But I heard from people in Sao Paulo or other places in Brazil that they have the exact same issues there. So first day, went to a bloco in Ipanema, which is one of the more expensive places on the beach in Rio. And people tried to grab our phone in the crowd, and it was really crazy because there was nowhere for them to run. That was the ridiculous thing about this. They literally were all squashed in. 3 black guys tried to grab the phone out of my hand, and I knew it was I was anticipating something was going to happen, so I had it secure. They failed because they're useless criminals. They didn't have the intellectual capacity to at least, organise the element of surprise, which is why they're in these situations in the first place. It's no one else's fault but their own. And then they didn't even have to run, because the thing is, it's so tolerated in Rio, because Rio de Janeiro is such a racist state that it's accepted, and it's a criminal state. It's accepted that you're able to rob and attack white people. It's like a given. And it's not just the criminals that do this, that take advantage, And I'll explain further. If you go into a restaurant in Rio, a well-established restaurant, they will charge you more because you're white. If you get in a taxi in Rio, they will really screw you over. And taxi drivers everywhere in the world screw you, and that's why I usually take Uber. But I tried to take my first taxi, having left my phone for security at home, and a nice lady, seemingly, she ran my card 3 times and it declined, which was strange, but I assumed it was a security issue. So she drove me back to the hotel. She was being way too nice as well. And I got back to the hotel, checked my phone because I was anticipating I'd have to security, unblock the card. She tried to run my card for $1,000, $700 and $147 for a $5 taxi. The whole time with that sly kind of smile, imitating someone that's pleasant and nice to be around. And beforehand I was in a buffet, a sort of buffet where there's a selection of different foods, and you go up and you take a bowl, and supposedly they weigh it and give you a price, right? Which doesn't make any sense anyway, because what if you filled your bowl up with rice? Is it the same price if it's beef or quail egg? Of course not. So it was a cheap place, and I got to the top, the cashier, and it was like $17 or something, because I'm white, of course. And then the next day we went to a bloco. I was wearing a costume, like a necklace, but it's part of a costume. It just looked like, it was actually cat's ears. And a guy just tried to rip it off my throat in the middle of the street in front of everyone, assuming it was like a gold chain. But these people don't run as well, because there's no liability for their actions, because the police don't even enter into the blocos. That's the crazy thing about it. The police are in the perimeter. If you're lucky enough to see them. I only actually saw police at a family-orientated Beatles cover event, which was in the main park, in the more exclusive area of the town. But there are no police within the blocos themselves within Rio. And I heard from locals, it's the mentality that, well, too many people get robbed that they don't even bother trying anymore. And then, of course, it's the idea of the criminals have such prowess and precedent over the city. They are the controlling factor. There's the element of people don't want their families hurt, or people don't want to be threatened or undermined by other corrupt cops, or criminals knowing perhaps where they live, or it's that kind of scenario that they just don't bother policing in Rio anymore. Maybe just certain areas, certain exclusive areas, but for the most part, not at all. And again, it's if you're white in Rio de Janeiro, you get attacked. It's just a kind of it's expected and tolerated. So that's thus far the events. And then on the last day, we went to a kind of the famed area of the city where samba supposedly came from. I frankly couldn't care less, but given that you're there at the time and other people are going, I thought it's good to attend. So in the space of about 10 minutes on the last day, a guy hit me in the head with a hammer, some junkie on the streets. A guy punched me in the face inside the bar, and the taxi tried to charge me $1,000 for the taxi, all because we're white. And this isn't just happening to me as well. So my friends were all European. My French friend had his phone robbed. My Polish friends had their passports stolen. These are all in really public areas as well, whilst they're securing their properties. So they know it's going to happen. They're making sure they're doing everything they can to ensure they're not getting robbed. But because there's no liability for these criminals, there's a toleration by the entire population that it's acceptable to do these acts. No one would even attempt to, let's say, chase the criminals down. And again, people I've spoken to in Sao Paulo had the exact same issues themselves, just because they're pale. So it really is the most racist place on earth, in my opinion. And frankly, I see why there's such a separation in Brazil. And it's the usual suspects, without going into the aesthetics of these individuals. It is the usual suspects. It's the same form of criminality that you see in many places in the world. And there's no excuse for it, of course. So that was the Rio experience, let's say. But aside from that, South America is not really my cup of tea. Everyone has their preferences. Everybody has their tastes, let's say, culturally speaking. It's always going to be synonymous with your own upbringing. The environment which you've been conditioned within is going to give you a predisposition towards certain things in life, right? So South America is very kind of, for the most part, obviously there's kind of like blocks like Santa Catarina, or Catarina, I think it's Santa Catarina, don't know the name of the state, which are very different, more European. Argentina is obviously European to an extent, but Latin America is a very lazy place for the most part. People don't really have a kind of a progression towards, or a mindset to invoke progression. They generally don't care to better themselves. Again, not everywhere, but in most places. Whereas if you go to Asia, especially, I think Asia is a great place. You have such a widespread variety of culture. Just every aspect of life in Asia is unique. Whether it's the food you eat, whether it's the architecture, whether it's the climate, the aesthetics of the people, the language themselves. The thing about South America is because it's all been colonized by, I say colonized, that's not really a word we should use because it's actually an oxymoron, because it presupposes that there's another pathway other than so-called colonialism, when everybody has been conquering since time immemorial. So there's no real such thing as colonialism, but that's another story. And if you actually think about it instead of criticizing and use a little bit of logic, you understand that the word is a complete open contradiction and it actually has no meaning whatsoever. So returning to the language, Spanish and Portuguese are, with the exception of Belize and Guyana, are the languages utilized in all of the Americas, with the exception, of course, Canada and the United States, which wouldn't really be included in that. And because of that, the culture's been molded to a specific directive, and it's not as diverse as, let's say, going from India to Pakistan to Iran, where they speak Farsi, and to Afghanistan, where they have Pashtun, into China, where you've got Mandarin, Cantonese, etc. And you can keep going all around Asia, and you'll get different languages, you'll get different ethnicities, different cultures, you get different foods. It's a fantastic place, and it's very safe as well. If you have to dedicate, let's say, 2 weeks of your life to a specific region in the world, you're going to learn a lot more, and you're going to get a lot more value from going to, say, Southeast Asia or Central Asia than, let's say, Central America, where you've got Panama, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Nicaragua. They're all just mirrors of each other. There's obviously slight differences, but realistically there's not much at all. And given the proximity to North America, the food's crap. It's Coca-Cola, it's Pepsi, it's all the same substances that you'd expect to see in Europe or Canada and North America in particular, the United States. That's the general gist of the Rio Carnival. I guess this is more of an update to keep the channels active, because I haven't been able to post any of the truths videos as of yet. just because the pictures and the evidence within the societal control folder, where I keep the material for the next kind of documentaries, if you can call them that, it's just piling up, and I haven't had the time because I'm traveling to actually formulate the next one. So yeah, that's the update thus far, and hopefully we'll have some more episodes coming out soon.